Hi, my name is Rob Avis with Verge Permaculture,
I'm Ashley Lubick with Dirtcraft Natural Building.
and tonight we're starting a workshop on natural building, specifically around combustion of wood, so rocket mass heaters, Rumford fireplaces.
We'll talk a little bit about fire and why rocket mass heaters make sense. We'll talk about integrating these into a sustainable design so we can heat our homes efficiently and combine them with other natural building techniques, passive solar design, and making our way sustainably through heating seasons. What we're designing today is a rocket mass heater, and I like to explain it as a poor man's, or some people would say a smart man's, masonry heater. This is a really efficient wood burning appliance that can heat any space. It can be a greenhouse or a house or a studio space. It burns wood efficiently in a really clean manner, and it gives out lots of heat for the amount of wood that's being burned. It incorporates a lot of mass, which means that as you burn the fuel, it's stored in that mass and released over a long period of time. So unlike a conventional wood stove where you have to put wood in it and continually feed wood into it in order to stay warm, these sorts of systems, you feed wood into it for a couple hours, you heat up the mass, and then the mass radiates that heat over an extended period of time, maybe 12 or 24 or 48 hours, so you don't constantly need to be feeding wood into it. So they can be built by anybody with very simple materials at a very low cost. So unlike a masonry heater that could cost as much as $30,000 to have a mason installed, these can be assembled with a few people over a couple days for a couple $100s.
I'm always so thrilled with the people that end up at our workshops or at our volunteer type projects, and everybody is really at first a little bit tentative. A new group of people, not everyone is really outgoing, and it's really foreign to a lot of adults to take off their shoes and socks and actually get back into the dirt. But we find, even by the end of one day, that people's attitudes are very uplifted and very happy, and they're chatting about all sorts of things and making new friends and enjoying others' company in the process.
Alright, so this is the rocket mass heater that we put into our greenhouse. What you see here is about 2 metric tons of mass, so 2,000 kilograms. And it's made out of cob, so a locally available material, very low embodied energy. Essentially it's just clay and sand and a little bit of straw. We got a recycled barrel here. This is the device that releases the heat really, really quickly. Inside of this barrel is a heat riser. Some flagstone, which is also a locally available material. And then chimney pipe, single wall chimney pipe going through the entire system. So the way that a rocket mass heater works is we've got a combustion chamber that runs horizontally, and as the flame is actually propagating, the combustion chamber is comprised of refractory brick, and so the energy gets reflected back into the flame, which creates a really, really clean combustion. And so there's very few products of combustion that have not been consumed. So the combustion gases come up the heat riser, which is an insulated steel pipe, cascade around the just inside this barrel, around the heat riser, but inside the barrel, which releases huge amounts of heat. And you can kind of see how much heat we're talking about here because the metal is changing color. And then we pick it up in a manifold under here and run it through a pipe. Now, because the gases have been fully combusted, we can actually remove the majority of the heat from the flue gases itself and store it in the bench. So you're probably wondering, how much energy does this bench store? Well, it turns out that this bench here stores, after about 3 hours of burning, close to 50 to 60,000 BTUs of energy. That probably doesn't mean a lot to you. In terms of growing though, if it's -10 outside and I light this thing for 3 hours, this bench will store enough energy to keep the greenhouse warm for about 30 hours. So that means that I can basically turn this thing on in the morning and walk away for almost 2.5 days, which is, 1.5 days. So there's a couple little devices in here that help us to get this thing started. Sometimes we don't get the best draw initially, so we've got a little clean out right here where we can prime it if we have to, so we may or may not have to do that. All priming is essentially we drop a lit piece of paper into the chamber, and it just starts to get the draw going. To light the rocket mass heater, we need 2 pieces of paper, obviously some flame, and we'll see if I can get it going in the first time. It's been hit or miss, so sometimes it lights up right away, and other times it takes a little bit of coaxing. The other thing that we need is really thinly cut wood, something that's going to start up really easily. So we have that ready to go. One of the characteristics of rockets that I really like is that they're designed to use waste biomass. So despite the fact that I'm using some pine right now, typically this rocket mass heater won't see this type of wood. You know, I recently read a statistic that if everybody moved over to heating with wood, we'd run out of trees in about 4 years globally. And that's pretty scary for me from a mechanical engineering perspective, because we need these trees to actually be able to live on this planet. And so the whole premise behind the design of this stove was to help people in developing countries basically cook and heat themselves without deforesting rainforests. So what we try and do is encourage people to design fuel hedges or systems that they can actually utilize waste streams like grey water or composting toilet waste streams to grow the fuel that they need to keep their houses and their greenhouses warm. So what we've done is we've actually made really small fuel, which we could have actually harvested from a Kirigana bush or pine cones, basically stuff that nobody even thinks about using on a regular basis. Okay, so the first step is to put a little piece of burning paper into the burn chamber and then follow it up with another piece of paper right behind it. And then we're literally, this is the other different thing about a rocket mass heater, is we're going to stick the wood in vertically, which usually freaks people out. And if we get it right, what's going to happen is the flame will actually get sucked horizontally and this barrel will start to heat up. So let's see if we can get that to go. Okay, into the burn chamber. Follow it up with another piece. So there's a bit of backdraft going on right now. We don't actually have our wind cap on outside, and so every once in a while we'll get a bit of blowback from the wind. So that's got to go on. I'm just going to place these things in just initially on this angle like this until things get started, and then we'll go to a more vertical angle. So there's no smoke coming back, which is a good sign. It means we've got draft. Okay, it's looking good. Sometimes you gotta feed just a little bit more paper in there. It's a good sound. Means the wood's starting to burn. It's not super exciting yet, but wait till it gets going. You see when I did that, how the flame just totally took off there, so it's really drafting now. It's great. That's a good sign. It needs to be drafting to get a good ignition. Yeah, so now our wood is ignited, so we can start feeding the wood in. And we'll start with small pieces and then we'll follow it up with larger pieces. So now what we do to feed this in is we're going to pull this wood back just a little bit and we're going to feed it in behind it. Another neat thing about this stove is because it burns small wood, you get a really clean combustion. So there's a lot of surface area to volume of wood, which means you get a lot of oxygen mixing with the fuels. Sometimes, like basically, there's two symptoms of dirty smoke when you look outside of a house if there's a fire burning inside. If it's black, it means there's too much fuel. Okay, so there's not enough oxygen to create a complete combustion. If it's white, there's too much oxygen. And so with these rockets, it actually prefers to have smaller pieces of wood that have little gaps between it, so that as the air gets pulled through the system, you get a really good surface contact with that wood. Once this thing heats up, we can actually go outside and take a peek at it. The majority of what's coming out of the end there is going to be steam. Very little smoke. So
yeah,
you can actually get up here. I mean, it's basically just moist. Just put your hand in there. You just feel it. It's just moisture.
Oh yeah.
It's steam.
Oh yeah.
Because of all the cob is still.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, there's
Cob's
barely any
still wet.
smoke smell at all on that. If anything.
You can start to see the rocket effect starting to take hold now. And you can actually, if you get your camera right in there, you can hear the rocket. That's where the name comes from. So the barrel's really giving off heat now. This would make a great little place to put a kettle, get some tea going. Lots of heat right at the top of the heat riser here, and you can see the discoloration in the barrel. It's kind of neat. So the bench is picking up heat now. And if we come over here, I can't put my hand on that barrel, it's too hot now. But there's barely any I mean, just a little bit of heat coming off of this thing right now, this pipe. So that's a good sign. It means that a lot of the energy is getting picked up in this bench and will be released later in the evening. And you can really see how hard the stove is sucking. We actually, from Dirtcraft, and I always joke that this is the only stove that sucks and blows at the same time. That's too risque, you don't need to put that in. I think my videos need to have a bit more humor in them. I'm always so serious.
Can you describe that sucking and blowing in more detail?